I am going to tell you the genius sales process that Alex Hormozi used at gym launch that made his company tens of millions of dollars. And I'll also tell you how you could replicate it for your own business as well. So, you may be asking, how the hell do I know this information? Well, I worked at gym launch. So, for people who may not know who I am, my name is Alex Beck. I have been in the online sales space for the past 4 years. I have got my start by working for Alex Hormozi at gym launch, transitioned to working for Iman Ghazi. I was a closer there. I was a sales coach. I've built sales teams. I've managed sales teams and have contributed in over $10 million in sales in the past couple years. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. So I still remember my very first day working at gym launch and thinking, God damn, this guy, Alex Hormozi, is a goddamn genius. And just for context, you guys, I got brought onto gym launch as a entry-level sales rep. I was a cold caller. Now, the reason why I thought he was a genius, Hormozi in specific, was their outbound sales process. They had this thing called the Gym Lords podcast. Now, I'm sure you've heard Hormozi talk about it a lot. He's a big believer in reciprocity. So you get what you give, meaning if you give to somebody, they will feel inclined to give back to you. And essentially what they did, their cold call approach, was to call gym owners and pitch them to come onto a podcast to promote their business and talk about the ins and outs and the ups and downs of being a gym owner. You guys, every single gym owner said yes to the invitation of the podcast. I would set 10 to 15 people on a damn day sometimes. It was insane. When we think backwards, the typical cold call approach is very, very selfish. Essentially you're calling like a business or a consumer and, saying, hey, I could do X, Y, Z for you. Jump on a call. That way I could sell you into something. And as I said, Hormozi was really big on reciprocity. And he felt that if you gave to gym owners ahead of time by getting them on a podcast where they could promote their business and have a valuable conversation with someone super knowledgeable in the space, in return, those gym owners would give back to him or feel more inclined to work with his company, Gym Launch, to scale their business. And that's exactly what they did. They made tens of millions of dollars using that system, you guys. And it was insane. So not only that, I was also one of the podcast hosts for the podcast, Gym Lords. You could find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. You'll hear me hosting, these podcasts with different gym owners. Now, essentially the way that conversation went, we did them over Zoom. So, the cold caller would call the gym owner, pitch the podcast. They always said yes. They would schedule the meeting over Zoom. And then I would jump onto that Zoom call and host a podcast with the gym owner. And my job was to not only give them a ton of value on that call, on that podcast, but to also find a pain point, to find the missing thing in their business that was helping them or stopping them from scaling. For most business or for most gym owners, it was all marketing, like 99% of them. They relied on referrals. They, didn't run ads. They didn't know how to, and so forth. So what I would do at the end of every single podcast would say, hey, Alex, I had a great conversation speaking with you. I'm glad that you're crushing it with the gym. By the way, you mentioned you're not doing anything for marketing. I have this guy of mine. His name is Jacob Hopkins, and he fucking crushes it when it comes to scaling gyms with the marketing side of things. Would you be open to hopping on the conversation with him? I would love to connect you guys. You guys, every gym owner accepted the invitation. They went through such an extensive process of getting value, marketing promotion for their business. They just had a valuable conversation with me that when I pitched a consulting call, essentially, with someone on Gym Launch's team, they always said yes at the end of that podcast. Now, one thing I will say, I've had this question before when I told the story, is that, hey, Alex, is it disingenuous, You basically got these people on a podcast with the hopes to sell them into something. And Gym Launch wasn't cheap, you guys. It was like a $40,000 product that these people were paying for. My answer is not at all. You know, they got so much value throughout that process, not only from being on the podcast, but from getting some additional marketing for their business, to a valuable conversation with the podcast hosts, myself. And then I also connected them with one of the consultants on the team that knows their shit when it comes to scaling gyms. And that first conversation was always a value given conversation with the consultant. So even if they decided to not work with Gym Launch, they got tons of value along the process. And a lot of them came back 2 or 3 months later and ended up buying anyways. So it really was a genius process, and it made them tens of millions of dollars. And it's something that I carried with me to this day. Obviously, I'm telling the story, but also with like the consulting I did over at Iman's team. I spoke with a lot of agency owners, and they'd always ask me about the cold calling process, review my script, review, this, review that. And obviously, I can't give you an exact way to replicate Gym Launch's cold outbound process. It would take me like looking at the type of business you're running, the niche you're in, and so forth. But if you think backwards to Reciprocity, how could I give as much value to the person on the other side of the call as possible? Whether it's a consumer, whether it's a business, they will always give back to you.